Hey, good evening, and welcome to Everyday Talk 24/7. Thanks so much for being here tonight. I'm going to continue with this theme of self-talk because it's so important for us to get a handle on it because it impacts our lives so deeply. Issues of anxiety, worry, fear, self-condemnation, desires, lust, relationships, our ability to understand God's faithfulness to us, our sense of calm and well-being is largely shaped by our self-talk. So, good question would be, what is self-talk? Well, this is a definition that I'm using, and it works for these videos, and you may see different ones, but in terms of the way I'm using the conversation, the definition of self-talk, this is what I believe is most helpful and biblical. Self-talk is those conversations and thoughts that we have in our minds about the experiences of our life. The thing that goes back and forth in my mind and your mind about all the experiences and events of our lives. Therefore, our mood, our sense of well-being is determined by our internal evaluation of these experiences. Our mood is determined by our internal evaluation of these experiences. And this evaluation is shaped by our self-talk. These discussions we have in our mind about the experiences of our life. And here's the important part that I really want to stress. We talked about it last night. We assume that no one else is aware of these talks that we have with ourselves. These back and forth discussions. Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Do I like that person? Do I not like that person? Will this be something that will be beneficial to me? Or will it harm me? There's all these internal things that are happening to us. And we actually think that they're private. We think this is something just happening here. But in reality, that's not true. They're not private. Psalm 139, verses 1 through 6, which we mentioned last night, says that God knows the very thoughts that are on my mind before I even have them. God is an intimate part of every one of these self-talks that you and I have. It's right there. And this is where the battle takes place. See, we have been fed, have been made to believe by the enemy, by our enemy, that we are independent free agents, that we own our own destiny, and that we've always been in control, or it's always been about us. But that's not true. The Bible paints a very different picture. The Bible talks about a battle that's happening. I'm going to read from verses 16 through 18 in Galatians chapter 5. Galatians chapter 5, verses 16 through 18. Listen to these words. But I say, this is Paul talking, but I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not carry out or gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh sets its desire against the Spirit of God. And the Spirit against the flesh. You see, that's the battle. That's why self-talk is the battle for your mind. The flesh, verse 17, sets its desire against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh, for they are in opposition to one another. In other words, they are at war with each other. There's a battle going on. And the net result is that you do not do the things that you want. Very similar to language in Ephesians and in Romans 8. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. If you are led by the Spirit, you can be free of this battle in terms of the being controlled. The battle's going to be there, but we've got to be led by the Spirit. This is what's important. You cannot be neutral. You have never been neutral. See, we think that we can pick and choose, but we have never been neutral. all of us started this life off as God's enemies. So you see, what you and I think is a private conversation with yourself is really the conflict that is being described in Galatians chapter 5. This battle between the flesh pulling you in one direction and the spirit pulling you in the other for God, for good. And the flesh is just the remnants of that sinful nature that Jesus died for and was crucified when we became Christians. But what remains is the flesh. That's where the battle is. We have been rescued from the darkness of this old, sinful nature, fleshly way of thinking when we were controlled by the enemy. Let's read that in Colossians 1, verses 13 and 14. But here's the passage that I really want to focus on in terms of launching into these further discussions of self-talk. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 and 3. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 and 3. And you were dead in your transgressions and sins, in which you formerly walked, according to the course of this world, or the way of this world, according to the ruler of the power of the air, the Spirit who is now working in the sons of disobedience, among whom we also were formerly conducted ourselves in the lusts of our flesh. You understand? We were under the control of the enemy, of the evil one. We may not have thought we were. We may have thought we were our own people. Our desires of our flesh were at war with God, and they were under control of the evil one. That's what Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 and 3 is saying. And we were doing these desires of the flesh and the mind, and we were by nature children of wrath, just like the rest. Do you see the picture here? We were never these people deciding for ourselves and making good and bad choices as if we were neutral. Before God rescued us, what Ephesians 2, verses 1 through 3 is plainly telling us is that we were under the control of the enemy of our souls. And our lusts, our desires, everything about us was shaped by the enemy and those desires. But now we have been rescued. So before we were rescued, we had no choice. Now that we have been rescued by God, we have been claimed by Him, we have been pulled from that ugly pit, we now have a choice. We now have the opportunity. And this is the battle for the mind. This is the battle for self-talk. That's why self-talk is the battle for your mind. We can either listen to that flesh and those desires which represent all the things that we've been rescued from, or we can respond to the wonder of the Spirit. Galatians 5 goes on to point out the deeds of the flesh, the ugly stuff, and contrast them with the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, those kind of things, self-control, good things. But notice, we were never neutral. At one point, we were the enemy of God, even if we didn't recognize it or know it. That's one of Satan's greatest deceptions. He's got a whole bunch of people that don't realize that they're under his control. That's what Ephesians 2 is telling us. But God, who is rich in mercy, rescued us from that, so that we are now alive. And now we have the opportunity to choose. And that's where the battle is. That's where the battle for self-talk is. I can choose to listen to those old fleshly desires, which are self-serving, and we're going to talk about the consequences of that, like things that condemn us and keep us from the peace of God and the wonder of Christ. We can either buy into that stuff, or we can buy into the beauty and the path of peace and security of the Spirit. That's what this battle for the mind is all about. This is the battle for your self-talk. We're participating in this battle. Listen to the voice of the Spirit that we find in His Word. That's the hope that you and I have. Listen to the Word of God. Don't listen to those thoughts that come from the enemy that want to beat you up and destroy you and leave you just a frazzled mess. And we're going to start talking about specifics tomorrow. We're going to start off with anxiety. There's so many rich topics, but this is kind of the foundation. Again, give me your thoughts, feedback. Let me know what's not clear, and we can try to work this out. But this is huge for us. This really is a huge, huge battle. Will we walk in the ways of the flesh that we've been rescued from, or will we know the wonder of walking according to the Spirit, where the Word of God makes us free? Thanks so much for being here tonight, and thanks for working through this with me. And I really look forward to your thoughts, your feedback. Thank you so much for your thoughts from last night. And engage with me about this, because this is so important for us. You have a great evening. Goodbye. Thank you so much for watching. It is such a huge encouragement.